Good evening to everybody tonight. I'm so happy to see you all. Thank you very much for joining us. And tonight is actually the last class that we'll be giving in the series of the very, very special topic of Shabbat. I just want to mention that something that gives me a lot of pleasure, and that is that I hear from some women. Yesterday we had a different shiur, and some women told me, they said, you should know that there's been some kind of a total change in everything to do with Shabbat. She said, we really followed your advice. Everything starts early, and if Shabbat comes, it's a totally different feeling. So it gave me so much pleasure and so much joy to hear it. And this morning I got a text from someone who's actually sitting here tonight, and she told me, you know what, this morning I woke up because we had a shiur, we spoke about the topic of Tehillim, the power of Tehillim and the importance of reading Tehillim. And she said to me, this morning, I woke up in the morning, and before I got to work, I read 7 chapters of Tehillim. And she said, my whole day was different. So it was really, really a nice feeling to hear that people actually take in something from what we speak about. So tonight is going to be a conclusion of what we spoke about in Shabbat, about to do with Shabbat. And let's talk a little bit about things to do with the world. When we think about who is really in charge of the world, in this world right here, when we're here, who is in charge, our body or our soul? What would you say? Of course, the body is in charge, right? The soul is there, but it's somehow being pushed to the corner. Who remembers during the week when we run around, when we're busy with everything, that we have a soul inside? Do you remember? Do we feel it? Are we in tune with our soul? We don't even think about the fact that there is something so precious and so holy inside us, which is our soul, our neshama. But that's how the world is. Shabbat is actually the only time where we can feel, we can get in touch with our neshama. Shabbat is the time when there's no distractions. There's no cell phones, there's no computers, there's no going to work, there's nothing on our mind. And that is a special opportunity for us to actually realize and connect with something that really is most important, our neshama. Shabbat is the day that if we do things properly, this is a special gift that we can actually feel the neshama. We can hear the neshama. We can touch our neshamot. Shabbat, of course, not only that it's the goal of creation, which reminds us what we're here for, but on Shabbat we get something very special. We get what's called neshama yethera. I don't know if you've ever heard this term. In English, it means an additional soul. Neshama yethera. What does it mean? What does this mean that on Shabbat we get a neshama yethera, an additional soul? So, the very simple meaning which Rashi brings is that when we are at ease, when we are not under pressure, when there's nothing on our mind, we're able to sit, be happy, enjoy, eat, drink, right? We all know that when we're under pressure, when there are things on our mind, when we are very busy at work and there is something very urgent that has to be taken care of, we sometimes forget that we have to eat. Well, there's also the opposite. There are some people who, when they're under pressure, they overeat. But very often, when we are preoccupied and there's a lot on our mind, even if we eat, there's no enjoyment. On Shabbat, when we're at ease, there's nothing that bothers us, nothing that pressurizes us. We're able to sit down and relax and enjoy. That's the special meaning. However, there's, according to the Mekubalim, according to the Kabbalists, they tell us that our neshama becomes stronger and holier through the holiness of the Shabbat. We get some additional holiness through the holiness of the Shabbat. Now, where does it come from? We're told this neshama yetera, this additional soul, comes right from, they say in Hebrew, ginzei hamelech, the treasures of the king. Of course, the king referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that place where this neshama comes from, there's no sorrow. There's only light. There's only happiness. There's only good. And that is accidentally one of the reasons why on Shabbat we're not really supposed to express any sorrow, any sadness. Shabbat is a day we're supposed to be happy, to enjoy, to feel the oneg, the enjoyment of the Shabbat, the pleasure of the Shabbat. It's something that's kept especially for us, the Jewish people. Let me give you a mashal. The mashal is of someone who owns a beautiful store which is full of chandeliers, full of, different sizes, different shapes, different forms. And one day, his wife decides to bring their son to the store because the son insisted that he wants to visit his father in his workplace. Now, the only thing is that the child is blind. The child can't see. So he comes to the store holding the mother's hand, and the mother walks around with him. And how do blind people get a sense of what there is? They touch everything. So he touches this chandelier and that chandelier, and he feels the different sizes and the different shapes. And then he touches a chandelier that he feels it's very big and has a lot of, all those crystals. And he says, wow, tell me about this. What is the difference between this chandelier that I'm feeling and the others that I was touching before? And the mother tells him, this chandelier has the ability to give so much light that everybody who would buy such a chandelier will be able to see a lot better. And suddenly she sees her child beginning to cry. And he says, so why don't you ever bring this chandelier for me to our home so I will be able to see better? Why is it that you kept it away from me and never gave me the pleasure of being able to see so much better? And the mother explains, this chandelier only helps those who are able to see. People who cannot see, even if you bring the brightest and the biggest chandelier, will never be able to see anything. And this is the difference between us and the nations of the world. We have the vessels to receive this holiness and to receive this special kedusha and to receive this additional soul and feel that there is something different here when we speak about Shabbat. As we said, this world is the world of the body. It's not the world of the neshama. But every time Shabbat comes, it's a reminder. It reminds us of what's really important in this world, because we all know what's more important, the body or the soul. Of course, we all know there's a huge difference. But who remembers, who understands, who is able to really go down to the depth of things? Shabbat, every time Shabbat comes, and we're able to separate and distinguish ourselves from the physical, it reminds us what we're here for, what our purpose is, what life is all about. Life is not all about the materialistic. life is about growth in spirituality. We're told in the Gemara the following: Neshama yefera nitna bo ba'adam be'erev Shabbat. On Erev Shabbat, on the eve of Shabbat, every single Jewish person gets this additional soul. And b'mosa'e Shabbat notlim otam mimenu. On Mosa'e Shabbat, the soul is being taken away from us. And then it says, Shabbat v'inafash. Kewan she-Shabbat, wow, avda nefesh. I'll translate it for you. It says, Shabbat v'inafash. Shabbat came and Hashem rested. And they say, once Shabbat comes, once Shabbat starts, woe to us, we lose the soul. Little confusing. Are you confused? It is a little confusing. Let me explain. What it says here is we should be, once Shabbat comes, once we accept Shabbat upon ourselves, woe to us because the soul left us. But we know that it's the opposite, right? That's why it's confusing, because I just told you before that once Shabbat starts, we receive this special holiness, this additional soul, the Neshama Yetera. So how do we understand that? And we understand it the following way. If I gave you something very, very precious to hold for me for a short period of time, I'm telling you, you know what? I have this beautiful, gorgeous, expensive necklace, all with diamonds. It was given to me. It's a Yerusha. It was passed down to me from my grandmother. But I'm giving it to you to hold it for me for 24 hours. What will you do? We're going to take care of it. We're going to guard it. We have to make sure that as long as this precious jewel is with me, I take good care of it, right? The same thing applies to the neshama. When we know that we're getting this neshama yetera, this additional soul, for a short period of time, it's only for 24 hours, 25 hours, our job is to remember, to be aware of the fact that here we are. We got this something very holy, very precious, and my job is to nurture it, to take care of it, to guard it. How do I do it? How can I do it? How can I take care of it? By making sure that I do things that are holy and not again get distracted and get pulled towards doing what I'm not supposed to do on Shabbat. It might come to you as a surprise, but there is even an opinion that one on Shabbat should only read material that is holy, something to do with learning about the Torah, not something to do with the parasha, and not even, I remember, I know that there are people who don't even look at regular newspapers on Shabbat. Why? Because this is part of the physical. We want to do as much as possible to make sure that we nurture this special holy soul that we get on Shabbat. And the way to do it is to make things that go hand in hand with what this neshama represents. Okay, now there's another reason. We want to make sure also that when Shabbat is over and this additional neshama leaves us, we still have the impression of the holiness and the special feeling that we felt over Shabbat. As we said, we don't want to feel that we're all empty, that it's all gone. We want to make sure that a little bit of this special holy neshama, the additional neshama that we have, still remains with us and is carried over to the rest of the week. And we spoke about it in the past. We said that Shabbat actually gives its holiness to the rest of the week. So that is something that we have to keep in mind also. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some practical things to do with Shabbat. Women also are obligated to hear the Kiddush on Friday night and Shabbat morning. And in fact, when it comes to the Kiddush on Shabbat morning, according to the Ben Ish Chai, Chacham Yosef Chaim Alav Shalom, and other Chachamim, now I don't know if this applies to, I don't think this applies to those who follow the Ashkenazi way, but those who follow the Sephardi ruling, women should wait until they hear Kiddush before they eat anything, or even drink water. So now, if women really want to eat before, what's the solution? They can make Kiddush for themselves. There's no problem. But it's very important. Men are actually allowed to have, let's say, a drink or coffee before they go to synagogue for the prayers. But women really are supposed to wait until they hear Kiddush. You're looking surprised, but that's how it is. Another important thing that I wanted to mention to you. It's very important for women to go to Beth Knesset, to synagogue on Shabbat. I'm familiar with some communities where girls, women feel that this is their day off. I even remember one lady who told me, and I was so surprised, she was a religious Orthodox lady. She told me, on Shabbat morning, I stay in bed until my husband comes back from synagogue. So, and there are some communities where it is quite acceptable that women or girls don't go to Beit Knesset. I want to tell you, it's very, very important. I want to read for you what the Ben Ish Chai writes about it. He writes the following: Isha shehi mishtadalet uba lebet hakneset beyom Shabbat. A woman who makes an effort to come to Beit Knesset on Shabbat, vero'a et sefer haTorah, and she sees the Torah scroll, ve'shomat ve'ona amen u'kedusha, and she hears the blessings, and she answers amen, and she hears the kedusha, ve'shomat birkat kohanim, and hears the blessings of the kohanim, the priests, yehe la sachar gadol. She will get a big reward. Very important. And then he brings the story that actually happened with a lady at the time of the Talmud who had a synagogue right there in her neighborhood. I guess in those days they didn't have synagogues every few blocks. So there was one synagogue in her neighborhood. And she wouldn't go to that synagogue. She would always go to the further synagogue. There was another synagogue which was further away. And one of the Hachamim, Rabbi Yohanan, said to her, there are other synagogues that are closer to you. Why do you take the trouble to walk far away to the further synagogue? She said to him, if I go to the further synagogue, I will get additional sachar, additional reward for every step of the way that I take to go to the synagogue. And he answered to her, you answered very well. Okay, so I'm not telling you have to wear your sneakers and walk miles to go to the synagogue, but it's very, very important, really, to go to Beit Knesset and to participate in the prayer. Of course, when I say to go to Beit Knesset, and participate, I mean to be part of it, not to start engaging in conversation with people around you. The idea is to go there and to participate and to hear the prayer and to see the Sefer Torah and to answer when it's proper to say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, and Amen, and the Kedusha and the Kaddish is very, very important. As the Ben Ish Chai writes here, Yehe la sachar gadol. She will get a very big reward. Something very simple to do.
The woman that they have little kids, it's better to stay home.
I'm going to answer at the end. No problem. Well, let's leave the questions to the end, but it's very important. I would like to discuss it with you. Now, how many meals do we eat on Shabbat? On Shabbat, we're supposed to eat 3 meals. Friday night, Shabbat, lunch after we come back from Beit Knesset, and a 3rd meal, Seudah Shalishit, which is between, right after Mincha, if you go to synagogue, or if not, later in the afternoon. Now, women are also obligated to eat 3 meals on Shabbat. And when I say meals, it means that we also that it has to be accompanied with eating bread, and the right amount of bread. Okay, it's very, very important. Just like men are obligated, women are also obligated. You don't have to, if you're worried about your weight, then you can skip all the dessert afterwards and the additional. But bread on those all 3 meals is very, very important. And we are told about different rewards that people are going to get as a result of making sure that they do eat the 3 meals. I know most people do Friday night and Shabbat lunch, and some people try to get away with a 3rd meal, Seudah Shalishit, but it's very, very important to make sure that we eat all 3 meals. We're actually told that people who eat the 3 meals of Shabbat will be saved from 3 things. One is Heble Mashiach, the difficulties that are connected with the coming of the Mashiach. The second one is the judgment of Gehinnom. And the third one is the war of Gog uMagog. So I'm not going to get into it, but basically it's worth it, believe me. Even, and if we, and don't worry, if we don't eat extra of unnecessary stuff, we should not really gain weight on Shabbat. I'm telling you. What makes us gain weight is not the bread, it's all the extras. So we can cut all the extras. Okay. You know what? I'm going to mention something about what you said about the children. Obviously, every mother knows her children. And every mother knows how her children would behave if she takes them to synagogue. And of course, it's our obligation to make sure that we don't disturb the services in the Beit Knesset. However, it's also very important to expose our children to being in Beit Knesset, to being part of coming to Beit Knesset. And you know, the children's souls are much more tuned to the spiritual things, and much more sensitive to what goes around them. They feel a lot more than we do. You know, with us, we somehow, as we grow older, we lose the sensitivity, the ability to understand really things in depth. They feel it in a way that now, at our age, we are not really able to understand. So it's very important, even if for a short while, I think, to make a point of bringing our children to Beit Knesset. Obviously, we have to, I'm not talking about a baby, but I'm talking about children who are a little older and are able to absorb and feel the special thing, what goes on in Beit Knesset. They feel something special when we take the Torah out of the Hechal. They feel something special when they are with their father, and their father, well, in the Sephardi synagogues, every Shabbat there's Birkat Kohanim. And isn't it something very, very special to be under the father's sisit at the time of Birkat Kohanim? These things are very, very important, and I think we don't want children, of course, to cause to disturb the services, but I think it's important to train them from a young age to come to Beit Knesset, even if it's for short periods of time.
The mother send the children with the father, and the father, they pray for themselves.
That's what I'm saying. It's important for the mothers to go to Beit Knesset. It's important. Tell them what I told you. Tell them what tzachar, what reward they are going to get as a result. It's very important for us women to also feel part of the tefillah, to also feel part of the kedusha. We're told that when there are certain passages that we read in the tefillah, when we read them, that is when we get the neshama yethera. That is when we get the additional soul. There's a special tefillah that we read every Shabbat, which those of you who don't understand Hebrew, I really want to urge you to try and understand in English. It's called Nishmat Kol Hai. Please read it in English and see what an incredible, amazing tefillah this is. You'll read it, your soul will start trembling. You'll really feel it. So it's very important for women also to go to Beit Knesset on Shabbat. It's very, very important. Okay, now I'd like to talk a little bit about Mosai Shabbat. As we said, when Mosai Shabbat comes, our additional soul, the Neshama Yethera, leaves us. And that is why, I don't know if you experience it, but many people feel some kind of down when Shabbat is over. By the way, I want to tell you something. When do we end Shabbat? Just like we spoke at length about how important it is to make sure that we don't start Shabbat at the latest possible time, and we spoke a lot about it, I'm not going to go into it again. I want to tell you also, when Shabbat leaves, it's like an important guest leaving our home. Recently, I was in someone's home, again, an Orthodox family. I happened to be there when Shabbat was over, and I was amazed that as soon as it was time, that moment when Shabbat was over, immediately all the hot water urns were disconnected, the lights were turned. It was like in such a sudden change, and it was right at as soon as it was possible. And I felt even a greater feeling of kind of loss, because it was so sudden, and right when it was, okay, so nothing is going to happen if we wait another few minutes, okay? I remember when I was a teenager, I had some friends who, as soon as Shabbat was over, would change into their jeans. As soon as Shabbat was over, they put on their jeans. In fact, you know, we're really supposed to keep our Shabbat clothes for the fourth meal, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So, Mosai Shabbat, so let's add a few more minutes to when Shabbat is over, because we don't want to have the feeling that, oh, thank God Shabbat is over. Now I can run to my phone, check all my emails, check all my texts. Let's be a little above. Mosai Shabbat, as we know, we make Havdalah, which means separation or to distinguish. And as the prayer says, we distinguish between light and darkness, between the Jewish nation and the nations of the world. And we do it, we usually use three things. What do we use? We use the wine. We smell the besamim, the good scent, the besamim in English? Spices, thank you. And we light the candle. Now, the reason for smelling the besamim, the spices, is because smell is something which is a little more spiritual. And this gives some kind of comfort to our soul for the loss of the additional soul that just left us. That's the reason why we smell the besamim. the light, the candle. Why do we light the candle? As I told you in the previous shiur, in the previous class, that first Shabbat after the creation of the world, the light, there was a spiritual light, a special light that came from Gan Eden, from the Garden of Eden, that remained lit for the entire 36 hours. The entire Shabbat, the light was on. Now, again, as I mentioned, it wasn't the light of the sun, it wasn't the light of the moon. It was special spiritual light that Hashem left in the world in honor of the Shabbat. As soon as the Shabbat was over, there was darkness. And that is when Adam took 2 stones and rubbed them against each other and created fire. So that is the reason why we light fire on Shabbat, light the candle on Shabbat. Speaking about Havdalah reminds me of a beautiful story which I would love to share with you. It's a story about our revered Chacham Yosef Chaim Alav Shalom, the Ben Ish Chai. When he was just 8 years old, there was kind of a discussion one Mosai Shabbat whether he should hold the Havdalah candle or his sister. They both obviously were very excited and both wanted to hold the Havdalah candle, a great honor. The father of the 2 children, Chacham Eliyahu Chaim Alav Shalom, told his son the following. He said, "My dear son, if the reason you want to hold the Havdalah candle is just for the sake of the pleasure, the enjoyment, then we should give the honor to your sister because she is younger than you. However, if you are able to show me that you have a deep understanding of what Havdalah is all about, and you understand the meaning of it, then I would give you the honor of holding the candle." Chacham Yosef Chaim answered his father and said the following. He said, the whole meaning of Havdalah is to show the separation, the distinction and the difference between that which is holy and that which is profane, between Shabbat and the rest of the week, between the Jewish people and the rest of the nations of the world, which is correct, which was a beautiful answer. However, his father was not quite satisfied, and he said, "You know what? If that is the case, let me ask you another question. In that case, if it's so important to show the difference between that which is profane and holy, the 6 days of the week and Shabbat, the nations of the world and the Jewish people, why don't we start with the beracha of Hamavdil? Why do we first say the beracha of Hagefen, Besamim, the candle, and only at the end we conclude with Hamavdil ben Kodesh lechol, etc.? Quite a deep question. The young boy thought for just one moment and he replied the following. He told his father, "You always taught me that the purpose of a Jew is to always go higher and higher, to always raise himself. Now, what we see in the Havdalah is exactly that. We see the order of the berachot. We start with that of the wine. The wine engages the mouth, which if we look at our face is all the way at the bottom. Then the next blessing, the next beracha is besamim, on the special sense. We go higher, a little bit higher to the nose, because we need the nose to smell the beautiful besamim, the beautiful spices. Next is the blessing on the candle. Boreh me'oreh ha'esh. We go higher to the eyes. And then finally, we end with the beracha b'hamavdil, which requires the deep understanding, the thought which is all the way in our brain, the understanding of the difference between that which is holy and that which is not, etc. When the father heard his son's deep understanding and most amazing answer, he let his son, Hacham Yosef Haim Alav Shalom, the little boy, to hold the Havdalah candle. After Shabbat is over, it's very important to eat what we call Seudah Revi'it or Melaveh Malka, an additional meal. If you can eat bread in that meal, so much the better. If not, eat something mezonot, or something to show. Even the whole idea is that we have to prepare a special table, just like we have a special guest who comes to our house. And just before the guest leaves, we prepare something for them as a farewell meal. That's the same idea. Shabbat is a special guest, Shabbat HaMalka. So we have to prepare something in honor of Shabbat who's leaving us. It's important, even for women, to make sure that we eat something when Shabbat is over. And when we eat the last meal, Seudah Revi'it, Melaveh Malka, we should remain with our Shabbat clothes. In other words, we keep our Shabbat clothes. As I said, we don't change in our jeans and our right as Shabbat is over. We keep our Shabbat clothes until the meal is over. And then it's also a very good thing to bring blessing into the home, to read the special reading that we have, V'yiten lecha ha'elokim mital hashamayim. Don't know if you're familiar with it. If you're not familiar with it, if you open the Sidurim, you'll see that there's special reading that Pesukim that are taken from the Tanakh, and it's very, very good to bring blessings into the home, to get into the habit of the whole family sitting together and reading it. We're told that it's good to bring blessings upon the home. We all know that Eliyahu Navi is always mentioned in connection with Mosei Shabbat. There are songs about Eliyahu Navi. We mention Eliyahu Navi. What's the connection between Eliyahu Navi and Mosei Shabbat? We're told that Eliyahu Navi, who is going to bring the Geulah, to be one of those who will bring forth the Geulah, will not come on Erev Shabbat, on either the eve of Shabbat or the eve of holidays. So now that Shabbat is over, as soon as Shabbat is over, this is the first opportunity that Eliyahu Navi will be there. So as soon as Shabbat is over, we say, okay, Eliyahu Navi, we're ready. Come, please, give us the good news about the Geulah. So Shabbat is over. We are told that Shabbat is so special, that it's not that we keep the Shabbat, but the Shabbat is the tool, the element that kept us, the Jewish people, going. And as we said before, Shabbat, if we just keep one Shabbat, we are told that the Geulah will come, that the Mashiach will come. You know, we all, as I said in the beginning, we all think about many things in our daily lives. We think about our parnassah, we think about our family, we think about our health, we think about our career, we think about so many things. But really, what's the goal? I want to tell you something. Maybe I shouldn't end it in such a sad way, but just to give a perspective to what I'm talking about. Yesterday, we had to go to a funeral of someone very, very dear to us, who passed away at the age of 62. We went to the airport, and the kind of funeral here, since they sent the body to Eretz Israel, the funeral was one in the cargo area at the airport. So there were, you know, number of people, there are few people, less than maybe 15 people. And the wife who lost her husband unexpectedly was saying, all his life, he worked so hard, and now he's ending in a box. And I understand her, but I was thinking to myself, you know, if we only remember what really our goal is, what we're here for, what we really, really want, what life is all about. Life is all about what's inside us, the special neshama that Hashem gave us, the spiritual. So, yes, we worked so hard, and then we end up we end up wherever we end up, but that's not what's most important. What's most important is our neshama. What's most important is what we save for our neshama. And Shabbat is something that reminds us of it. Shabbat is there to remind us that this is what counts. This is what's important. When we pray for all the things, remember what's really important to pray for is for the Geula to come, for Mashiach to come. We forget about it. It's not so important. When we read in the Siddur and we read the part in the Amidah which speaks about bringing the Mashiach, we're supposed to really feel it. We're really supposed to feel the desire for it. Shabbat is there to remind us. And Shabbat, by the way, Shabbat is considered to be me'en olam haba, is a taste of the world to come. We don't understand what it is. We don't know what it is, but it's supposed to be something beautiful, something wonderful. And Shabbat just gives us a taste of what it's all about.